I want you to imagine something for a second. Just put yourself in this situation. You are staring at an eviction notice. I mean, your bank account is at absolute zero, your kid is sick, the fridge is empty, and someone just offered you money to do something you explicitly know is wrong.
Right. The ultimate nightmare scenario.
Yeah, exactly. And what happens next isn't, some high-level philosophical debate about good and evil. According to the neuroscience and the sociological research we are diving into today, it is a purely biological chain reaction.
It really is.
I mean, we all like to sit here and think we have unbreakable morals, right? A firm line in the sand that we just won't cross. But what happens when physical survival is suddenly on the line? Welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
So our mission today is to explore one of the most uncomfortable questions in human history. Is honesty actually enough to survive when the system is stacked against you? We are looking at this really harsh intersection of neuroscience, morality, and extreme poverty. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to do that effectively, we have to establish a baseline rule for the discussion. We need to strip away our preconceptions and look at this scenario not as a simple judgment of, good and evil, but through the objective lens of human biology and environment.
Right, because judging is easy.
Exactly. When we analyze the data on extreme human desperation, the traditional ethical rulebooks, well, they often just fall apart completely. We have to look at the mechanics of what is actually happening in that father's mind when he is holding that eviction notice.
And I really want to break down those mechanics because that father's brain is no longer functioning in its default state. Under that kind of chronic, crushing stress, the kind where you genuinely don't know if your child is going to eat tomorrow, the brain is absolutely swimming in cortisol.
Drowning in it, really.
Drowning in it, yeah. And at those massive sustained doses, cortisol acts almost like a neurological override switch. It actively suppresses the prefrontal cortex, which is, our hub for long-term planning, ethical thinking, and complex social contracts.
And when that prefrontal cortex goes dark, the amygdala takes the wheel.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. The amygdala is our ancient evolutionary hardware. It doesn't care about the social contract. It doesn't care about your 10-year career plan or, your reputation in the community. It only cares about keeping you alive for the next 5 minutes.
Just immediate survival.
Right. The biological priority shifts entirely from asking, what is the moral thing to do, to basically screaming, what must I do to get through today?
It's kind of like, think of a commercial building's fire alarm going off. When the alarm is blaring and there's literally smoke filling the hallways, the building's automated management system kicks into survival mode.
That's a great way to picture it.
Right, so it immediately shuts down the air conditioning. It turns off the pleasant background music in the elevators. It redirects all emergency power to the exit signs and the sprinkler systems. I mean, you don't stand there in a burning hallway worrying about what color to paint the lobby walls.
No, of course not.
Your brain essentially shuts down the moral philosophy department to divert all available power to the escape fire department.
What's fascinating here is, taking that fire alarm analogy even further, the building management system isn't glitching when it shuts down the music.
Yeah.
It is functioning flawlessly.
Wait, really? Flawlessly?
Yeah, this shift in the brain is not a moral weakness or a character flaw. It is a profound biological imperative. Our brains evolved to prioritize immediate survival over abstract ethics. Because historically, the ancestors who stopped to philosophize while a predator was chasing them, well, they didn't live long enough to pass on their genes.
Makes total sense, yeah. But we do need to add a massive caveat here, just so we don't paint with too broad a brush. Millions of people living with very little remain incredibly principled, generous, and honest.
Oh, absolutely.
The source data doesn't suggest that poverty automatically equates to dishonesty.
Not at all. The distinction lies in the difference between being poor and being submerged in a neurochemical bath of pure survival panic. A person can live simply and retain full access to their prefrontal cortex.
Right.
The physiological hijacking occurs during severe, unrelenting desperation. It's about what happens to character when the biological environment becomes so hostile that the brain's alarm system never, ever turns off.
Okay, but if human biology simply hijacks the brain during extreme stress, if the amygdala locks the prefrontal cortex in the trunk and hits the gas, does that mean free will just disappears?
That is the big question.
Because if we blame a cortisol flood, aren't we just handing out a massive excuse? I mean, it sounds like the source is saying it's not his fault he stole the money or took the bribe because his hormones made him do it.
And I see where you're going.
Doesn't that completely undermine the whole concept of personal responsibility?
A common pushback, but the source text argues that understanding a biological mechanism doesn't remove personal responsibility. It actually deepens it. Think about a drowning man. You don't blame the drowning man for gasping. You build a boat.
Oh, you don't blame him for gasping.
Right. Gasping for air when you're sinking underwater isn't a moral failing. It is an involuntary reflex. You can't stand on the shore and yell at the drowning man to just be more disciplined and, stop needing oxygen. The biological drive is just too strong.
Okay, let me push back on that a little bit because we have to test this logic based on the materials we have. Let's look at the blank slate theory mentioned in the text.
Yeah.
We operate on the assumption that no infant is born a hardened criminal, willing to exploit people just to survive. The environment applies the pressure.
Right.
But if the environment is entirely to blame for creating the desperation, where does the environment end and the individual begin? I mean, if society is the ocean and the person is just gasping for air, why hold anyone accountable for anything? We could justify literally any terrible action by just pointing to the person's stress levels.
Yeah, and that is the ultimate friction point in sociological research. The text is very careful here. If we lean too far into biological determinism, we excuse horrific behavior.
Exactly.
But if we lean too far into pure free will, we ignore the reality of human suffering. The most robust frameworks in the source material advocate for a dual approach.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning we absolutely must hold individuals accountable for their actions, because a society without accountability instantly collapses. But simultaneously, we have to recognize that environments can and should be redesigned to reduce that chronic stress.
So it's about holding two opposing truths in our hands at the exact same time. The individual is responsible for pulling the trigger or taking the bribe, but society is responsible for the conditions under which that choice was the only visible way out.
Precisely. A healthy civilization requires a widening of our vision. It demands individuals who strive to choose integrity, alongside systems that actually make that integrity survivable. Because when we focus purely on punishing the gasping man, we completely ignore the structural flaws in the ship that caused him to fall into the water in the first place.
That makes a lot of sense. And, if our brains are physically rewiring to normalize these compromises, that implies our environment isn't just influencing us, it's actively programming us.
Yes, it is.
We aren't just talking about someone who misses one rent payment and instantly turns into a supervillain. The pressure is a slow drip.
It is a very slow drip. The compounding pressures of modern life create this constant, low-level hum of panic. The text highlights this beautifully. We are talking about millions of people facing decades of financial insecurity.
Oh yeah, the ever-present fear of job loss.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Medical bills that could wipe out a family's entire net worth in a single afternoon. The sheer unaffordability of basic housing. Every single month is a fight to keep your head above water. And that prolonged exposure is where neuroplasticity enters the equation.
Neuroplasticity being the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life, right? Our brains are highly efficient machines. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the biological rule of neuroplasticity is simple. What we practice, we become.
What we practice, we become.
Yes. Moral decline is rarely one dramatic cinematic decision. It is almost always hundreds of tiny, seemingly insignificant compromises. When an action is repeated, the neural pathways associated with that action are physically reinforced with a substance called myelin.
So they literally get stronger.
Yeah, the pathways get thicker, faster, and much more efficient.
We've probably all experienced a microversion of this in our daily lives. Think about taking an extra 20 minutes on a lunch break, or fudging an expense report by $10, or, taking office supplies home.
Standard office behavior for some, yeah.
Right. But the very first time you do it, your prefrontal cortex is firing on all cylinders. Your heart is pounding, your palms white sweat, and you feel like a massive fraud. You explicitly know it is wrong. But by the fifth time you fudge that expense report, the cognitive dissonance is fading. Your brain realizes that feeling guilty is burning unnecessary mental energy, so it prunes the pathways causing the guilt.
Wait, it just deletes the guilt?
Basically.
Yeah.
By the 100th time, the brain has physically rewired itself. You don't feel a pang of conscience. It is just administrative overhead. It just feels like routine behavior.
Wow. Now, scale that up for you, listening right now. From stealing a stapler to securing your family's next meal. The first time the father in our scenario tells a lie or takes a dishonest shortcut to survive, it absolutely crushes him. But He survives the day.
He survives the day, and his brain logs that action as a successful survival strategy.
Ah.
The neural pathway for deception is slightly reinforced.
Yeah.
By the 10th lie, the discomfort is manageable. By the 100th lie, the 100th compromise principle, the brain doesn't register it as a moral failing at all.
It just registers it as the standard operating procedure for navigating a hostile environment.
Exactly. The person hasn't just changed their mind. They have physically altered the architecture of their brain to adapt to the pressure.
Which brings us to a frankly terrifying realization. If neuroplasticity wires our brains based on our actions, and our actions are heavily driven by our environment, we are forced to look at the society we've built in a completely different light.
We really are.
We aren't just building economies, we're building brain sculpting machines. So what does this all mean?
It forces an ultimate philosophical question. The source text argues that instead of pouring all of our collective energy into asking, how do we punish those who break the rules? Society should be asking, what kind of society makes breaking the rules the easiest, most logical path to survival?
Right, because we spend billions on the punishment side of the equation. I mean, prisons, surveillance, compliance departments, we basically obsess over the symptoms.
We do. And there's actually an ancient, intuitive recognition of this dynamic in religious texts, which the source material brings up. Consider the phrase, lead us not into temptation. Regardless of your theological stance, that phrase is a profound early understanding of environmental programming. It is essentially a plea to not be placed in an environment where the biological pressure to do wrong overpowers the moral desire to do right.
Because if you put a human being in a pressure cooker and turn the heat up high enough, eventually they cook. It's not a matter of if, but when.
Precisely. If an economic or societal system constantly rewards exploitation, if it makes integrity incredibly difficult, expensive, and disadvantageous to sustain, then that system is fundamentally unstable.
Yeah, I'd imagine so.
It is actively selecting for and biologically rewiring its citizens for corruption. The overarching metaphor that ties the biology and the philosophy together in the text is about agriculture.
Okay, agriculture.
Yeah, the question is not, are people fundamentally good or evil? The question is, what kind of soil are we planting them in, and why are we surprised by the harvest?
Wow. What kind of soil are we planting them in? That cuts right through all the noise. You know, we started this deep dive down at the microscopic level. We looked at cortisol flooding the synapses, the amygdala hijacking the sophisticated prefrontal cortex in moments of pure, unadulterated panic.
Right, we analyze the pure biology of desperation.
From there, we moved to the psychological reality of neuroplasticity, how the brain physically reinforces the neural pathways of deceit through hundreds of tiny, uncomfortable compromises until dishonesty stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like oxygen.
The slow, methodical science of compromise.
Yeah. And finally, we zoomed all the way out to the macroscopic level,
Yeah.
the societal soil, the systems, the economies, and the safety nets we build, and how they either act as lifeboats in a storm or actively push people's heads further underwater.
It's a lot to take in.
It really is. And it brings us back to a haunting question that I want to pose directly to you listening to this right now. If the system you live in makes integrity wildly expensive and dishonesty highly profitable, how long would your own principles last? And honestly, what does the answer to that question say about the system rather than about you?
It is a heavy question, and it demands rigorous self-reflection. But I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over on your own.
Okay, let's hear it.
We spent this time discussing how the brain physically rewires itself to make dishonesty feel like routine survival when that is what we are forced to practice.
But human biology is neutral. Neuroplasticity works in both directions.
Right, it responds to whatever stimulus it receives.
Precisely. So, could the exact opposite be true? Imagine if a system was deliberately designed to make radical honesty, deep empathy, and extreme generosity the absolute easiest, most instantly rewarding path to survival.
Oh, if integrity was the path of least resistance, how quickly would human biology rewire us to be effortlessly good? What would that kind of soil actually look like in your workplace, in your community, in your daily life tomorrow morning?
What an incredible thought experiment to end on. If the edge we are pushed to is one of radical generosity, how does that fundamentally change the architecture of who we become? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the soil around you. Keep looking closely at the systems we navigate every single day, and we will catch you next time.